Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Anti-Doping Podcast, brought to you by the Partnership for Clean Competition. I'm your host, Dr. Marie McNeely, and today we are joined by our guest, Renee Tomb. Listeners, Renee is Director of Policy Administration at PGA TOUR, and in our conversation today, Renee will tell us a little bit more about her work, PGA TOUR's anti-doping program, and why the PGA TOUR's clean sport efforts are so critical. So, Renee, we are excited to have you with us today. Welcome to the show. And how are you today?
Hi, Marie. Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing well and so excited to be here to represent the PGA Tour.
Well, we are looking forward to learning more about you and the amazing work the PGA Tour is doing. So can you start by just telling us a little bit more about yourself and your role there?
Myself personally, I am first and foremost a mother of two young girls, aged 7 and 9. So my husband and I are really looking forward to winding down and looking forward to the break of Christmas and having some time with our family. Basically a Florida native, born in New York State, but raised in Florida, and I'm a proud graduate of the University of Florida. Go Gators. The PGA Tour, I'm about 15 years in with the tour. So my current role is policy administration, which is part of our competitions team. So I oversee the anti-doping program for the PGA Tour. In addition to that, I also assist the International Golf Federation with their anti-doping testing and athlete communication for the Olympics. I coordinate our mental health program for our athletes at the PGA Tour. I oversee our integrity program, our education for our players. And we launched this year an anonymous texting service, a whistleblower, if you will, for players to provide general concerns regarding regulations as it relates to anti-doping, integrity, and other policy violations. I also manage our fitness and physio trailers that are part of our moving circus week in and week out. We travel across the country every week and bring everything with us. And we have a fantastic team as fitness therapists, fitness trainers, and chiropractors that provide service to our players on site each week. Health and wellness for our players is obviously very important to us. And providing these tools and services to players that they need to stay healthy on the road is a priority to us. I think that's all of it. I do stay busy and I do have a lot of fun.
That sounds wonderful. Now, you mentioned you've been with the PGA Tour for some time now, and I know different people find their way to careers in sport and anti-doping through a variety of different paths. So, Renee, can you give us a little bit of insight into the path that you took to get to this current position?
I started my sports career in college football, actually, which brought me to the Jacksonville, Florida area, which we are headquartered here in Ponte Vedra, which is just outside of Jacksonville. The Gator Bowl is hosted in Jacksonville, Florida. And when I worked with them, they also hosted the ACC championship game. So I coordinated 2 football games with a great team and decided to stay in the Jacksonville area and made my way to the PGA Tour through corporate partnerships. And over those 15 years, I've had some unique roles. The most unique, I would say, is working directly with the commissioner. I worked for Commissioner Fincham, our past commissioner, for 7 years, and Commissioner Monahan, our current commissioner, for about 2 years. I transitioned my way out of that role after having children, looking for more of a 9-to-5 in sports, which is a little bit challenging, but found my way to the competitions team actually during COVID when our world was really quiet. And I wanted to just help out and stay busy and do as much as I can to help. So I've been in this role currently for just over 2 years, so it's much to learn and certainly a lot of growth ahead of me.
Definitely. And I'd love to talk a little bit more about PGA Tour's history. Are there particularly issues maybe related to anti-doping that PGA Tour has faced historically? And maybe if so, Renee, are there measures that you can tell us about that the organization has taken to try to combat these issues and continue to grow over the years?
Luckily, anti-doping is not historically or typically a big issue for professional golf. So our focus is working hard to stay ahead of education and providing the education and communication to our athletes to help them to stay safe and healthy through several resources. And we have an extensive TUE process to keep that in line. Basically, our priority is to do everything we can to keep our players, aware of the WADA code updates and everything we can to have them staying safe, especially as we lead into Olympic years.
Absolutely. And I love to hear that there's this emphasis on education. I think these preventative efforts are so important. So can you maybe tell us a little bit more about what this education looks like?
So our education program, we provide several resources. We have a manual that is updated annually. We work closely with WADA and in step with them with their code to update this annually and communicate it out to our players and also communicate any of the changes within this program. The program has a little wallet card that they can put in their wallets with them, have them in their pocket, have it in their bag with them every day that has a list of prohibited items and also a list of permitted medications if they have a cold and such, what they're going to go to. We provide resources through DFS Access for medication lookup, and we provide access to NSF Certified for Sport for supplementation lookup.
Certainly. Well, I think these are amazing resources. And I think good to have that little wallet card handy when you're traveling for competitions and things like that. You've got all the information you need kind of right in your pocket there, which I think is awesome. So for you, Renee, personally, I guess, why do you think it's important to invest in these kind of anti-doping and clean sport efforts?
Absolutely. Well, personally, I seek to be genuine and honest in my work and home life. And luckily, this is in line with the way of thinking of the PGA Tour's core values. We strive to be excellent, to honor the game's history. And within our values, integrity is set as a priority in all areas of our sport and business. So without an anti-doping program, we would not have an even playing field, and we would not be being fair to those athletes that hold themselves to this standard of professionalism. And for me, this is huge important because we continue to strive to be the best and continue to be leaders and role models for future generations of golfers.
Definitely. Now, before you entered this world of sport professionally on the maybe more administration side, were you an athlete yourself, Renee?
I sadly was not. I worked in sports in college, and I worked at our basketball arena, and my degree was in sports. So it's always been very sports focused. Dabbled in sports growing up. So I guess if you can't play sports, you work in sports is my motto.
Yeah, you enjoy watching them. I think that's part of the fun.
I'm a big fan, yes.
Oh, wonderful. And now we talked a little bit about the education program and some of the efforts there surrounding education at PGA Tour, but maybe can you take a step back and give us just an overview of what the anti-doping efforts look like there today at PGA Tour, what all the different pieces are that come together to make this successful program?
So we actually conduct tests on 4 tours annually. We have the PGA Tour, Korn Ferry Tour, PGA Tour Canada, and PGA Tour Latino America. And we test urine and blood on these tours. And testing is virtually conducted every week on PGA Tour. So all of our members are tested multiple times throughout the season, throughout the year. We work with Drug Free Sport to manage test collection on site at our tournaments. And our specimens are sent to the UCLA Olympic Analytical Laboratory and are analyzed for the WADA in competition menu. We also have a very comprehensive therapeutic use exemption TUE program, which enables players that do have legitimate medication conditions to use these prohibitive substances as prescribed by their physician and in line with our TUE committee. So this process has been functioning since 2008, has been very successful for us.
Excellent. Well, Renee, it sounds like PGA Tour has a successful and comprehensive testing program for anti-doping. And I know some substantial revisions were actually introduced to PGA Tour's anti-doping program in 2017. So can you tell me and our listeners a little bit more about what these changes were and why they were made at the time?
I will say in 2017, we expanded our program. It started in 2008 with urine testing. In 2017, we expanded to include blood testing. We also added to our prohibited list to include all the substances and methods of the World Anti-Doping Agency, and we are in line with them annually. And we also implemented the public reporting of suspensions related to drugs of abuse. So any athletes that are in violation of recreational drugs are now publicly announced.
Very interesting. So you highlighted some of these major changes that came through in 2017. Was there a particular rationale why these specific changes were made or why these were kind of the most important changes to make at the time?
I think it's very important for the PGA Tour to be in line with WADA, especially we are an Olympic sport now, and it's just very important that we are educating our players and making sure that they are constantly doing the right thing. And we just wanted to make sure we are holding ourselves to the highest standard, given that's what we strive to do in every area of our business.
Absolutely. And for these anti-doping rules and this anti-doping program, who exactly does this apply to in the world of golf?
So all of our members on any of our tours that I had mentioned, PGA Tour, Korn Ferry Tour, Latino America, and PGA Tour Canada, this is the exception of our PGA Tour Champions, which is our senior tour. Every other tour is bound by this program. And also any player who participates in a tournament that is covered by the tour is bound by our program. That's in addition to members. We have folks that are playing in our tournaments that sometimes are not members.
That makes sense. And then in terms of, I guess, delivery of the education program, then do all of these people get the same education program or does it differ a little bit depending on what their situation is?
It's the same. We don't like to have any variances in that. We want to make sure everybody is treated equally and everybody understands the process across the board. That way we ensure we have an even playing field.
So Renee, I guess looking at the big picture there at PGA Tour, what are some of the things, in your opinion, that you think the PGA Tour does particularly well in terms of its anti-doping program?
So we work closely with the International Golf Federation and all the other professional tours across the world, actually, to ensure consistency and alignment throughout the sport. We just think it's important And like I mentioned before, the access to resources, education for our players, and the consistency with drug-free sport. As I mentioned, we work with them on our collection. DFS has a great partnership with us, and they work really well with our players. They know our players well. They know our tournaments well. And this is very critical to us that our players are comfortable and trust this collection process. And then our team here, we are essentially here for our players to ask any questions and just make sure they're not putting anything in their body that could eventually put them in a position to be in violation of the program.
So it sounds like PGA Tour is working with a lot of interesting stakeholders. You mentioned drug-free sport for testing, some of these national and international organizations. So what is it like for you, Renee, working with and maybe coordinating all of these different stakeholders?
It's great. It's a different world for me. This is a whole new ballgame for me as far as anti-doping. This is one area in sport that I was not aware of until I joined. And it's a great community and everybody works well together. And I think we're all of the mindset that we all want to do the right thing and we all want to be cohesive. And that's just the best way to be fair across the board and constantly sharing what I learn. And every other sports leagues are constantly sharing what they learn. And obviously within the world of golf, we all just try to stay in step together to ensure our athletes are all on the same page.
Fantastic. And I know PGA Tour has been a longtime contributor, of course, to the Partnership for Clean Competition. So can you talk a little bit more about why it was so important for PGA Tour to support the PCC?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, our sport is built on integrity, and we obviously feel it's very important to contribute to the future of clean sport. PGA Tour, I think I mentioned before, also want to stay in line with the advancements of anti-doping science. So just being a part of this conversation and supporting the efforts of PCC is critical to achieving this cohesiveness. And I think I've said it probably 100 times already, is the continued education of ourselves, our athletes, and our tournaments. We just really feel the education is critical to be able to safely hold world-class events across the globe.
Definitely. And for this education program, is it delivered sort of online, in person, a combination? What does it really look like for the athletes?
It's online, and we have, I guess, somewhat internal athlete protected website. We're working on an app for them as well. I mentioned they have that wallet card in their pocket, but hopefully they can have this at their fingertips. We're trying to make it as user-friendly for them as possible. We have the resources published on their website. We have a couple of all-player meetings throughout the year, and we always provide updates to them there. They are working with us constantly and with our tour medical advisor, Dr. Hospital. They always have free access to him all the time as well. So there's just plenty of resources at their fingertips. And I think we educate them on building relationships with us. Like if they have questions, most of the time, they're not going to go to the website. They're going to pick up the phone and call or text myself or Andy Levinson to ask a question, which it makes us feel good to know that they trust us with that information. And that way they have a direct line to us for communication.
Absolutely. I think having these open lines of communication with the athletes is so important. So was the education program or the anti-doping program, is there a structured way that athletes are providing feedback or helping develop and continue to evolve these programs?
We do have a player advisory council that is part of our board, and they have a voice for all of the players. So there's a line of communication there. And then also we have an anonymous whistleblower. They can reach out to us if there's any violations that they are seeing. And then obviously, like I said, the communication line, if they just want to pick up the phone and call us, is always there.
Fantastic. And we touched on anti-doping science, which you know is a passion of the PCC. So I'd love to dig into the anti-doping research a little bit. For the PGA Tour, is there a specific area of anti-doping research that you are most interested in right now?
Absolutely. Well, we're super excited about the dry blood spot testing and looking to expand the testing capabilities of that. And then any other alternative testing methods like saliva, hair, and breath. And of course, the continued research of prohibited substances and how they actually impact the athletes on their performance is something we're super interested in.
Oh, very cool. And I guess thinking about PGA Tour and other anti-doping organizations, a lot has happened, even in recent years alone. So what do you think that these organizations have done that may be most effective in deterring doping in sport?
Well, I think just creating greater efficiencies in the actual collection process has been huge. Setting these disciplinary actions in place. And then again, education and communication. I think if the athletes are aware of what the rules are, they're going to be better equipped before they take them, before they get tested.
Absolutely. I think this is so important in those efficiencies. I can't imagine having to do all of this on paper. I know a lot of this has moved now to digital. Is this the case at PGA Tour?
We're working through that. Yes, testing our drug-free sport is actually moving everything digital for us now. We used to have the yellow and pink slip that players sign every time they're tested, and the players get a yellow slip, and we just found they're always throwing it away, or it's getting lost, or someone could find it has confidential information on it, which we don't want. So all of our paperwork with drug-free sport for the on-site test collection process is going digital. We are moving from the yellow and pink slips that players sign when they are actually tested to a digital process where it's on an iPad and it's collected through DFS and it's saved digitally forever.
And I know we mentioned this kind of big shift from paper to digital and anti-doping, but I guess from your perspective, are there other big changes that you've seen just in your time there at PGA Tour in doping or anti-doping?
Yeah, obviously, I'm still fairly new. So for me, the dried blood spot testing is the newest and most exciting things that I've seen happen. And we've actually rolled this out on 2 of our tours in 2022, and it's been fantastic. Just a really quick 5-minute, virtually painless process, and it's been very, very well received by our athletes.
Fantastic. So what is some of the feedback that you've been getting from athletes?
They're relieved. If they're like me, I hate getting blood drawn. Like seeing a needle just throws my anxiety through the roof. So if you can imagine yourself on a competition day and you get pulled before you tee off to go get your blood drawn, that's going to throw you off completely, first of all. And second of all, you could have bruising, you could have pain, you could have soreness in your arms, which obviously for an athlete is not ideal. So they are just very grateful with this dry blood spot testing. We use the Tasso M20 device and it just sticks right on their arm. And it's literally 5 minutes. They don't even feel the little prick. So the feedback is no pain, no marking, and just the anxiety is dropped for them tremendously. So their mental space is not impacted on competition day.
Absolutely. That sounds like fantastic feedback so far from athletes. And I know for different sports, there are some different considerations when it comes to ensuring clean sport. And I know some sports have unique challenges. For PGA Tour, are there specific challenges that you encounter when it comes to ensuring clean sport?
Certainly. So the PGA Tour is unique in the way that anyone could actually qualify for many of our events. So if someone is good enough, we often have players participating in our events that have not been properly educated in our anti-doping program. Is one big challenge we have. And the second, I would say, is the lack of regulation in the supplement industry. This remains a serious concern, particularly when a lot of our athletes are encouraged to use supplements by their trainers. You just can't trust the supplement label. And we really encourage our players to rely on a third-party certification like NSF Certified for Sport for all supplements.
Well, thank you for sharing some of these challenges that PGA Tour faces. And I guess looking back at your career, you've only been in this particular role for a couple of years, but you've been with PGA Tour for some time. So do you have a favorite success story from your career, your time there at PGA Tour that you'd like to share with us?
There's so many stories that I won't bore you with all of them. So in this role, I mentioned I started in 2020. And though it wasn't directly related to anti-doping, just working through the COVID pandemic and overcoming this with our athletes and keeping everyone, including our athletes and everyone on site at our tournaments, healthy and safe was certainly the most challenging time of my career to date. But it was just a huge success being a part of the team that operated the tournaments while most of the world was really shut down still. And I'm extremely proud to be part of the team that made this happen.
Absolutely. And I think golf was kind of in this unique position of privilege almost with COVID because the sport is played outside. It's sort of naturally able to be social distance. So what was the COVID experience like for you, kind of navigating some of these other challenges related to competitions and just working in the sport during this time of complete shutdown really across the country?
Well, I will credit our tournament relations team and our player relations teams that they worked really. If you think about it, every week we're in a different state, in a different city. And at the time in 2020, every state had different regulations for COVID. So really just navigating what our process would be each week and what were we allowed to do, what we weren't allowed to do. We worked with one of our partners, Sanford Health, to actually bring large trucks on site to conduct testing for every single person, every single athlete, everything, staff member, volunteer, everyone that stepped foot at our tournaments was tested. And sometimes multiple times in the week, whatever the regulations were in the region that we were in. So it was challenging. There were no notes. Nobody had done this before. We didn't know what the game plan was going to be, but really the team came together and worked literally around the clock to make these events happen every week, especially with some of the international events and traveling and such was complicated. And some of these players would be tested 4 times before they stepped side on the golf course just to make sure they were safe. So it was interesting and it was a great learning experience. So we'll be ready for the next pandemic.
Absolutely. And for you personally, this was a role that you had just stepped into sort of in this time of chaos. So what was it like for you navigating all the challenges of COVID, but also all of the new responsibilities and considerations for this new role?
It was certainly challenging because we were so COVID focused the first year of my role. So anti-doping was didn't have time to catch up and learn. So I'm still learning a lot and still just diving into the anti-doping world because it was so COVID focused at the beginning. But it was also an Olympic year. So I was forced to learn drug testing and learn for the Olympic testing. It was sort of drinking from a fire hose for 18 months, but it's slowing down and I'm starting to feel more comfortable in my shoes in the anti-doping world.
Absolutely. And I can imagine you've learned quite a lot about anti-doping in the past couple of years. And you know that there are some challenges that the whole community is pulling together to work to solve. But oftentimes resources are a limitation. So Renee, if we took away all of the barriers and could give you all of the resources you could dream of, is there a particular problem in anti-doping that you would want to solve most?
I'm probably beating a dead horse, but I would say the misinformation and miseducation around supplements and the awareness around the risks of taking supplements in particular. We live in such a consumer world with thousands of supplements at your fingertips on your phone. You can just buy them and you're reading the reviews and you think they're safe, or your trainer's telling you need to take this. Athletes just need to be very wary and educated before they put anything in their body that's on the market. So I just think we have an SF certified for sport, which is fantastic. Anytime players ask us if supplements are approved, and our first answer is, well, we don't approve supplements, but if you take one, it must be NSF certified for sport. So they're a great partner for us, and our athletes use them every day.
Absolutely. And I imagine this supplement piece is a big part of the education program. Can you tell us a little bit more of what this looks like in the education program?
So we, like I said, we really rely on NSF certified for sport. And our top communication is we don't approve supplements. We don't recommend them. But there's actually an app for NSF certified for sport we recommend our players use. It's very user friendly. And it's on the player website and it's communicated everywhere they can go. I mean, I even use it for myself, honestly, now that I know that it's there. I've been so educated on supplements. I just wasn't aware of the risks for anyone taking them, honestly. So anytime I'm taking anything for myself or my family, I check now for NSF certified for sport because I feel it's just very trusted. And I wouldn't at this point take anything that's not been double checked.
Absolutely. I think regardless of whether you're an athlete or not, some of these contaminants that can be found in supplements are unsafe or are these banned substances that you don't want to be going into yourself or your family members, even if they're not going to be drug tested for sports purposes. So I think that is a wonderful resource and we appreciate you mentioning it. So can you tell our listeners, if they want to learn a little bit more about PGA Tour's policies or maybe some of these resources, what is the best way for them to do so?
We have a few. Obviously, PGATour.com has a copy of our program. USADA.org has a tremendous amount of educational resources. And of course, my favorite is nsfsport.com for those that are interested in learning about supplements and what's safe.
Fantastic. Well, Renee, thank you so much for sharing those resources. Listeners, definitely check those out when you've got some time. And Renee, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show today and to learn a little bit more about you and PGA Tour. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, it's been great to chat. Listeners, wonderful to have you here as well. If you haven't already, it would mean a lot to all of us here at PCC if you could leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And listeners, please note that the Anti-Doping Podcast features a wide variety of clean sport experts, and episodes may include statements and or viewpoints that do not necessarily reflect the views or values of the PCC. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Anti-Doping Podcast.